My official prediction, Vieira versus Holm. Guys, I'm taking Holm, but I've got a little bit of a caveat. I would like to see Holm do something different. If I could give Holly Holm some advice, and I must tell you, this might be the worst advice I've ever given, or at least the most unique. Like, I would have never said this for anybody in my life. I'm not sure I would ever say it again. But hear me out on this. Holly Holm is made for duration. 5 rounds, no problem. Does some of her best work in the 4th round. 3rd round, she's coming at you. The first 2, I find her to be a little bit of a slow starter. I really do. And the advice that I would give is don't be able to go to the 5th round. Be so completely exhausted prior to the 5th round that you have to quit on the stool. Have no energy left. Now, that's terrible advice. That is not advice that I would take for myself or that I would heed onto anybody else ever. You got to plan for a worst-case scenario. You must manage your energy. The entire battle is a battle of who can get who tired faster. But I think that Holly can get people out of there, and I think that she's given a distinct advantage. Guys, listen to this, and think about it from this perspective. If you had a great grappler, and the fight started on the ground, you are extremely unlikely to ever get up. The grappler would be at such a huge advantage that you're probably never going to see round 2. In fact, you're probably never going to see these athletes on their feet. Think about that from that perspective. If you had a great grappler and the fight started on the ground, who are you going to bet on? Do you even need any more info? You're going to say, this is silly, this is ridiculous, there's nothing to see here. I agree with you. But Holly Holm is a 17-time world boxing and kickboxing champion. She has the same advantage that we just agreed goes to the grappler. She gets to start every fight with this massive advantage. She should be getting people out of there. The same as you would think the grappler is going to find a submission, or secure a position, or wear him down, or put the weight on him, or ground and pound. The same way as you would think that the industry could not possibly move forward if we start these fights on the ground. It's the same thing in reverse. Got to get them out of there. And she has the skills to do it, and she has the power to do it, and she has the volume to do it. Holly Holm is an excellent, excellent fighter. And she always shows up in excellent, excellent shape. But if I was to go back and look at the fights that Holly has been defeated in, it wasn't because you've got this it wasn't what everybody thought, which is you have this wonderful striker, 17-time world boxing and kickboxing champion, the most decorated female striker to ever come into our sport. So you're going to think, if you go back and you look at her resume and you look at her losses, that they all took place on the ground, that the problem was the deficit on the ground, the same thing we've seen since 1993. That's not the case here. Holly does just fine on the ground, and she's extremely difficult to get there. It's one of these cases where I feel, I don't know, but I feel that at the end of the night, Holly still got gas in the tank. I mean, she is one of the great conditioned athletes in the history of our sport. You got to use that. And I do see many, I won't name them, but I do see many who show up in this fantastic conditioning where they're the only ones in the locker room. They're the only ones in the back that don't have to second guess themselves. If you ever wonder what confidence comes from, it only comes from one thing. Confidence does not come from experience. It doesn't come from your ranking versus your opponent or your skills versus your opponent. Confidence comes to one thing: the belief that you have in your conditioning. That's it. If you are in great shape, you will feel confident. If you're not and you took shortcuts, you didn't have enough time, you didn't eat right, whatever your excuse would be, you now don't have confidence. It is one thing and one thing only. And I do see a number of these athletes who are some of the better conditioned athletes in our sport. They can go 5 rounds easier than anyone else, but I don't see them use that energy. They look like they're ready for a 6th. They look like they're ready for a 7th. There should be nothing left. You should look like a train. If you're taking on an unexperienced fighter that doesn't have much of a chance with you, or you're taking on a world title fight, it should be no difference in terms of how much your heart is pumping out of your chest. You should look like you were hit by a train. You should be completely exhausted at the end of these contests. And I do see a number of fighters that look fresh. I'll hear the announcers say it. They mean it as a compliment. It's not a compliment. Terrible. If you didn't leave it all out there, you didn't give the fans, you didn't show respect to your opponent, you didn't think that you had to use it, you didn't show respect to yourself, you thought, I'm going to save this for what? For the shower in the back? For taking your gloves off? For your after party? What do you need the energy for? It's a very strange thing. And I do think that Holly's guilty of it. I believe her skills. She is world-class quality. Absolutely. I'm not convinced, like most, that her best days are behind her. I don't believe that. I think Holly can kick just as much ass now as she ever did, and I think she's got 2-3 good years still in her. She does not take a lot of damage, and it does come back to the way that she prepares. She is a consummate professional. You can just tell by looking at her. The stories that come out of her in the practice room, she's the first one there. She's the last one to go. I mean, this is a consummate professional. This is a great athlete, but if you got this energy, you got to go use it. And you got to use it now. I think that my analogy, when Holly hears it, I think that it will resonate. I think that it will set in with her a little bit. I'm going to say it a third time. But if you had a great grappler and you started the fight on the ground, there's a reason that we don't do that. The opponent would have no chance. The sport would be dull. The result would be known. If that's all true, then the other side of the coin, the exact opposite, has to be true, and it is. Somebody's going to be given a massive advantage because of how this game is played. If it's the same, then let's start them on the ground. But we don't. If we did the fight, we get ended quickly. Same thing has to be true in reverse. If you have a dominant striker, they need to go out there, they need to start striking dominantly right now. Don't wait.